what does it mean to be an influential voice in your daily life and what you do?
In your daily life, it means, first of all, knowing what your values are and making sure that they're not values that have been brought along from your family or from your past. Reevaluate what your values are right now and align with those values and stay consistent with those values. And when you are clear on what that heartbeat, that North Star is, then anytime you veer off, because we're humans, we're flawed, we're going to make mistakes.
Sure.
Anytime you veer off, you course correct by aligning to your values. And it also means not letting fear lead.
Hey everybody, welcome to Finding the Upside. Thank you so much for joining me today. I am in the studio with a very special guest, Tricia Brouk. Hey Trisha.
Maria, I'm so excited to be here.
I know. Thank you for coming in. I am excited to have this conversation with you as well and have you here with me.
Thank you.
So I wanted to give everybody a brief intro to Trisha, and then I'll hand it over to her for an expanded take on her journey. Trisha is a friend, a mentor. She has had a long career. She started as a dancer in New York City, and she worked in stage, film, Broadway, you name it. And then moved on to work as a choreographer as well as a director, screenwriter. She's worked with huge names like James Gandolfini, who, by the way, is New Jersey legend, the late great, and Steve Buscemi, Kate Winslet, just to name a few. She's works as a strategic advisor to help people with a message get on big stages to share their insight and knowledge. She also is the founder of the Big Talk Academy, which helps people do exactly that. So I'm going to turn it over to you, Trisha, to just elaborate a little bit on that for us.
Oh my gosh, I'm not sure I can elaborate. That was so incredibly precise. I'm originally from Missouri. I grew up in a small town called Arnold, Missouri, and I knew that I was going to move to New York City and pursue a career in dance. I didn't realize when I was 7 that I was going to manifest dancing with Baryshnikov. However, the posters on my wall clearly were manifesting that opportunity. And when I was dancing with the Lucinda Child's Dance Company, Misha joined us for a season, and that was a really special kind of realization of a childhood dream come to reality.
Wow. Incredible.
Yeah, I've been living in New York for over 30 years. I absolutely loved being in film, television, and theater. I'm still working on shows. I'm going to be directing a musical about the women's rights challenges from 1970 and the challenge that we still face. And
amazing.
So that's happening. But I also realized that my legacy was limited to the number of people in the audience and the length of time I was on stage when I was just dancing. So I moved into being on the other side of the camera and working as a storyteller in that way by supporting others and telling their story, and then moved into supporting amazing thought leaders and professionals like you who have such an incredible, influential voice and desire a little bit more strategy around how to use it and how to have that kind of impact.
Yeah, I love that. And you mentioned influential voice. Trisha has written many books. Influential voice, being an influential voice, your voice and your message matters. Tell me if I got that tagline.
Your voice
correct.
matters, yeah.
Okay, your voice matters. And talk to me a little bit about that book and what that helps others do. And obviously, it probably parlayed into this journey that you said to help others. But talk to me a little bit about that and share a little bit about the book.
The book happened. And it happened because I let go of what I thought I should be doing. I was shopping around a book proposal about how to be a public speaker because that's what people wanted me to write.
Okay.
And I had all these publishers say, that's fine, but it's not really speaking to us. And what I realized, Maria, was I didn't really want to write a book about public speaking, which is why it wasn't getting picked up. So I went back to the drawing board and just sort of thought about, what do I care about? What do I want to talk about? What do I want to share? And when George Floyd's murder happened, I sat down and wrote chapter 1, sent it to a publisher on Friday and got a book deal on Monday.
Wow.
And that was because I spoke from my heart and from my truth about what it means to give voice and to speak with dignity, curiosity, humility, respect, and love, and how that wasn't being taught from the Hill. And my desire to unite humanity through speech is real, and I do believe all voices matter, which means writing this book was an opportunity to teach people how to speak with dignity so that if you don't share the same opinion, you can still have respect and love for one another.
I love that. And I love the story of how that came to be and what, you and I have had many conversations about that. We're so aligned in terms of the purpose and the energy behind it. It's funny because all the years that I've worked in leadership and teaching leadership, it kind of was like, until I connected with the type of leadership and the values, very similar to your story, about what I wanted to instill and building places of belonging and inclusion. And that's when it got like the oomph and like lit me up. And I think it also speaks to more people than like your story about the book, how then it has an impact because it's emotional, it's from the heart, and it connects to people.
Thank you. It does. And we are very aligned when it comes to our purpose and our intention for being and the legacy that we want to leave. And I also think that by sharing my personal story vulnerably inside of the book about how I use my voice, it gives people not only permission to use theirs, but it reminds them that they don't have to be on a big stage.
Right.
Being an influential voice doesn't mean you have to be at the Barclays Center.
Right.
It means you understand when you're sitting across the kitchen table from your kids or your partner that everything you say to them can either impact them in a good way or a bad way. Yeah. It can either instill love or hate. When you're across the table from your employees in the boardroom, how do you communicate? What's the lasting legacy that you want to leave? And then, of course, in community. Yeah. I live in New York City, and there's 3 billion people on this small island. However, I know everybody in my neighborhood. Yeah. I know the shoemaker and the florist and the restaurateurs, and I make a point to say hello when I walk by. And that's what it means to be an influential voice. Yeah,
I love that. And, we've talked a little bit about, and I'd love to kind of get into this conversation about what it means today to be an influential voice. And I love that you brought up that you don't have to be on big stages because, again, we're very aligned in that as well as in terms of even in the work with leadership, you don't have to be at the top. You don't have to be the CEO to have an impact, right? You can impact those around you to the left and the right of you by caring for others and touching them and connecting with them in a very human way. So what does it mean today in everything that's going on? What is the most important and what does it mean to be an influential voice in your daily life and what you do?
In your daily life, it means, first of all, knowing what your values are and making sure that they're not values that have been brought along from your family or from your past. Reevaluate what your values are right now and align with those values and stay consistent with those values. And when you are clear on what that heartbeat, that North Star is, then anytime you veer off, because we're humans, we're flawed, we're going to make mistakes. Sure. Anytime you veer off, you course correct by aligning to your values. And it also means not letting fear lead. There's a lot of uncertainty right now in the world, not just in the United States, but in everywhere. The world. I have a team, several of my team members are Canadian, and there's a big election happening the day that we're recording this. And so using your voice, not allowing fear to lead, being comfortable with uncertainty and impermanence and detaching from the outcomes, that is how you start really embodying being an influential voice. And it also means when other people can't speak, you speak for them. Yeah. You speak out on behalf of them. You use your voice for good. There's so many people right now who are not able to speak out. And it's my responsibility and it's my calling to use my voice in service of them until it's safe for them to speak out again.
Yeah. Yeah, you touched on so much that I think is heavy on the mind of a lot of people right now, and I agree with you that I think that when I think about why I feel motivated to do that, right, and why I feel so passionate about doing that, about standing up and not falling in line, and where did that come from? I think it's really down to that value of wanting everyone to have a place to belong. And I was in a workshop one time, and we were talking about this very point. Uh, that was my point that I got through the exercise. And the question was, you either want that's your passion because you had it, or you didn't. And I had to think about that a little bit. I think that I certainly have had a place of belonging, but I think we all in our journey have felt at times that either we didn't fit in, for whatever reason. And I think that there's a duality in that, for me anyway. And I think it comes from both places. Me acknowledging my ability to always, the times that I did feel like I belonged, but also leaning on whatever that was, of how that felt, and really that reality, what that meant of not feeling like I belonged or not feeling like I fit in, and the pain in that, and having the empathy to extend that to others in all other different kinds of circumstances. So I do believe that is a responsibility that we have as human beings. And I think that so many people, if you say that, they'll go, yeah, I believe in that. But if they're not connected to that's the value that drives them, and they get distracted, and as you mentioned, have been made to be fearful for whatever reason, you can lose sight of that so easily, where you say you believe one thing, but you're doing the complete opposite.
That's such a good point, and I think the belonging and the empathy is such an important highlight, is that when you have felt as though you belong, you're unaware of how to have empathy for those who don't, if you're not conscious of that.
Yeah.
And I do believe that as human beings, we've all been in a situation where we don't feel like we belong, no matter who we are. And for me, it was when I was so desperately trying to get into dance companies in New York City. Why don't I belong? I was the dancer who would raise my hand and say, can you call the numbers out again? You must have accidentally forgotten to say mine.
Yeah.
I wanted to belong into that community so much. But what it did was it gave me such an understanding of compassion and empathy. And I can pinpoint when someone doesn't feel like they belong, so that I can immediately adjust so that I can welcome them into our community. And you are part of the Big Talk community, where our values are inclusion, curiosity, dignity, all of the things, compassion. And truly, we have a global community, and it's completely diverse, and we are absolutely inclusive. And right now, many of our speakers don't feel like they belong because of external reasons.
Yeah.
And so that means, for me as the leader of the Big Talk and of the Big Talk community, I need to make sure that everybody knows they do belong, and that they are safe inside of this community.
And that's so important in all of the places, for sure. Like, you do that inside your community, but I think about it as, you mentioned you can tell right away when somebody feels like they don't belong, right? And if we think about our daily interactions and all the spaces we're in, you can tell, like, even the kid in the classroom who is withdrawn and who is, very reserved and kind of outside of the little circle, like, just moments like that where you see that. Or in communities where maybe you're at a baseball game, at your kid's baseball game, and the one mother who's sitting by herself, just like extending a olive branch or a invitation to, how are you today? And bringing that person into the conversation is something that's so simple, and that we all can do and all have the ability to do. And I think that's important, not only because it's the right thing to do, but especially what you just spoke about, that there's so many places where people are being pushed out of, that the more we in our communities can be inclusive and create those places where we invite people in, I mean, you can't deny what kind of impact that's going to have, not just on them, but on yourself.
Yeah, I'm covered in goosebumps right now with what you're saying, Maria. And I have a client who I'm really fond of, and he has political views that are completely opposite of mine.
Mm-hmm.
And he posted something on social media recently that was so respectful and dignified, and again, completely opposite of my beliefs. Mm-hmm. However, because of the way he communicated himself, I sent him a private text message and I said, I want you to know how proud of you I am. I'm so proud of you for being able to communicate your thoughts and your opinions in a way that was loving and clear and unapologetic. And his response to me was so warm and welcoming. And he said, you are such a joy, and you have always been such an incredible leader. And that's what is important as an influential voice, is that you don't have to think like everyone else, as long as you allow the space for others to think the way they want.
100%. For everybody to be who they are, as they are, whatever that means.
Whatever that means. That's right. Human beings are complicated.
Yeah, we sure are. We sure are. You know, it's interesting because in the work in leadership, that's one of the things that also is so important in the communities, in, you know, whether it's small businesses, whether it's really big companies, is as leaders creating those spaces where people can do exactly that. And that can be tricky. That could be tricky. You know, I know traditional business shies away from, you don't talk about religion, you don't talk about politics, you don't talk about, you know, anything that's outside of the business realm. That's very difficult and not really realistic. And in these times, everything is politics. Everything is polarizing. Politics has infiltrated every corner of our lives. Well, that's unfortunate. In some ways, it's an opportunity to be able to have those conversations and be able to respect each other's differences. I think right now there's an assault on differences, and I'd love for you to comment on that and how we navigate that. But I think it's even more important for us that understand and respect that, to normalize celebrating all those differences and hearing all those differences instead of just being so one note, or we don't talk about that here. What do you think in terms of business? Because I've heard from a lot of CEOs, I've worked with a lot of CEOs and leaders that want to just stuff that in the corner. What do you say about that, and what can you advise in terms of your work and what they should do?
I'm not sure I know what anybody should do.
Yeah,
however,
understood.
I do want to share that I lead my team very transparently. They know what my beliefs are. Mm-hmm. If something has come up politically in the world or in New York City, I bring it to team meetings and I acknowledge it, and I don't expect anybody to be on my team or side. Mm-hmm. I simply express myself so that they know they can freely express themselves. We had a community member whose life was tragically taken by her husband. Mm-hmm. And I brought this to the team, and my one of my team members, he private messaged me in Zoom, and he said, "Would you be okay if I prayed?" And I don't pray. I happen to be, I practice Buddhist philosophy, and of course he could pray. I wanted to give him that opportunity. Yeah. It was so sweet and beautiful, and it was his contribution to the team. And I don't want to take anybody's contribution away, because everybody's contribution makes us all better. Yeah. And so because I gave him permission to do that, it's my hope that I gave him permission to be fully who he is from here forward. And it also showed the team that everybody's voice matters, and everybody can contribute in the way that they want to.
Yeah, I love that. And what I love about that also is you talked about values, and, you know, that is your value and you're living it and breathing it. I think we have a condition where there are a lot of companies and business people who say that these are our values, but they're not really living them. They're just kind of these statements on the wall or something that sounds good in a presentation. And I think you demonstrated that by showing that conduct there. And I think that that's what we should be, maybe I shouldn't use the word should, but aspirationally, if everyone was doing that in every single place, it would have a positive impact for all.
I think it would, and I think it would eliminate or at least lessen the polarization.
Yes. It's like almost by kind of siding with or keeping the division, it actually creates more tension and more places where people are uncomfortable. Whereas if we were just transparent about it and respectful and hold that space for all, I think that would be transformative.
And to remind you and the listeners and the viewers that tomorrow's not promised. Today is the precious day that we have. And if we're going to participate in hate, what a waste. So if you give yourself permission to only be in, I'm not saying I don't have bad moods. I'm a human being.
Of course. Yeah, we're all human.
But if you give yourself the grace to try to lead through the lens of love and lead from a place of empathy and compassion, then if tomorrow doesn't come, it's okay because you've done what you need to do in this moment.
Yeah. You know, there's a lot of, one more note on this, and then we'll move on from here, but there's a lot of CEOs, leaders, people in the business community that think that there's no value in terms of profitability, ROI, metrics, all the stuff that business talks about in what we're talking about here. And of course, I am always willing to argue and submit and present and make the business case for why that's untrue. But in a nutshell, how is it that people being happy and comfortable and safe to be themselves would not help business?
Exactly. Right? It seems so obvious.
It's very simple.
It's so simple.
And when businesses stay in their head and are so guided by, and leaders are so guided by all the traditional things that business follows and what we're supposed to do and what business is supposed to look like, and it has to have a line with this is what we invest and this is what we get. It's not always a direct line. There's not always a tangible thing from that.
Right.
It's a holistic overall impact, just like in your family, right? Like, if you can't put a dollar figure on being kind and inspirational to your children and teaching them, or your partner, but that has an impact. So what's the final word of what you might say when people are looking at metrics or the ROI for doing this work?
Well, I think I can share quickly the story of how I started a company and built a team. I'm a former dancer. I did not go to business school. I have a BFA in dance. And I've always been an entrepreneur. I have a fitness company that still runs. When I started building a team, I did not know consciously how to build a culture around my team. It wasn't something that I studied or knew how to do. It was something that I intuitively did because I'm a kind person. And so building this team and creating a culture of transparency and acceptance and belonging, your area of expertise, was something that was just natural and innate for me. And what I've seen over the years now, that I have a team of contractors who stay with me for 7 years, for 4 years. My contractors, there's no revolving door here. And that is because I have created a culture where they are safe, where they are heard and seen, where their voice matters, and where they are championed, whether we meet our goals or we don't. But ultimately, the numbers are rising because they all like coming to work. And that's just the simplest way of putting it.
Yeah. So I thank you for that. And I could repeat so many other stories of business leaders and entrepreneurs who've done exactly that, and even in big business, and it's worked. You know my story obviously super well. I created Rebel Leadership, which really in a nutshell is based on my leadership journey of coming to understand how to be a leader and what worked and what didn't. And really, Rebel Leadership is simply abandoning all the traditional, outdated corporate think models that don't work. It still exists in business today, and unfortunately, it also exists in our society, in politics, everywhere. This bad leadership model that people follow that is void of everything we've just spoken about for the last 20 minutes. And making the case for this again is one of the things that I thought about is, why would I work hard for someone? Why would I work hard for someone? If I really dug deep down to what's the foundation and how I built it and how I built that approach, you're not going to work hard for somebody that doesn't make you feel seen, heard, and valued. You're not going to work hard for somebody that doesn't care about you.
Right.
You're not going to work hard for somebody that doesn't make you feel safe. That's it. End of story. End of sentence, period.
Exactly.
That's it. And I remember giving a talk on leadership, and these were not necessarily people who were in a current role, or a business owner. Not that that matters, because everybody can be a leader, right?
Yes.
Everybody can do these things. But I thought, okay, what am I going to talk to them about in 20 minutes? What are the really foundational things that they need to know about leadership? And that was also some of what has gone into this Rebel Leadership program. It's the things that I just mentioned. It's to show care and concern, to be authentic, and then allow them to be authentic, who they are, as they are, what they are, to create a safe environment, stand in their belief gap, and then to invest in them.
Yeah.
That's it. And that could be applied in so many different realms. And when we think about, I've thought a lot about just different cultures and things that help to bind teams together. And, my son played football his whole life, and I thought about, he doesn't anymore, but about brotherhood, right? Maybe a lot of sports, but definitely football is based on brotherhood, and they talk about it. And what are the pillars of brotherhood? It's trust in your teammate, and trust in you to do your job and keep them safe. Care and concern, to give them, support one another, give them a hand up, especially when they're not doing well. To show care and concern whether they're winning or they're failing. To teach and mentor and help someone who might be a step or two behind you. All of those things work in communities, work in corporations, and work in our world, right?
Yeah.
So it just kind of still amazes me how we lose sight of that. I think we get clouded and lose sight of that, and that's why. And maybe, the desire to look for some ROI and metric, also just people just get clouded by. It's really pretty simple.
Yeah. It's so easy to be kind.
Yes.
and accepting.
Yes, 100%. 100%. Well, talk to me a little bit more about the Big Talk Academy, and just so you have touched and brought so many amazing people really to big stages, yes, but also really giving them their voice is the way I look at it, because that's a lot of the work that you do, is helping them to see that their voice matters and what they have to say matters. Can you talk to me a little bit about that and some of the amazing people that you work with?
Of course. So that sort of goes back to the belief gap you were just talking about. Speakers come to me and to the Big Talk Academy for various reasons, and mostly they think they want to become public speakers. And the reality is it's much more than that. Yeah. They transform into the human being they're meant to be in the world by learning how to talk about their story. The Big Talk Academy is going to provide you with the methodology and the process that you need in order to craft a signature talk, learn how to perform it, learn how to pitch yourself, and to get booked on stages and to have a career as a speaker. And inside of the curriculum, which is 30 plus years of my experience distilled into 12 modules, you have access to my process, the art of the big talk process, which is way beyond just learning how to write a talk. It's mindset, it's self-development, self-awareness. Because when speakers, when thought leaders and professionals learn how to masterfully communicate and craft a talk that is well-rounded, has a through line, has a strong opening and a closing, they can actually change and even save lives while making money doing it. So that's why I founded the Big Talk Academy. I was working one-on-one with speakers, and I realized not everyone can afford the investment of time or the investment of funds. And if I were able to support global communities with a virtual curriculum, that's what I was going to do. And it's a trademarked, true, proven methodology that has put thousands of speakers in the realm of being professional speakers.
Yeah, what I love about that too is that it's funny because a lot of what you experience is what I've gone through in the last few years is wanting to share and touch more people. And it's very difficult when you work, because I've worked one-on-one with companies and one-on-one with teams for so many years, but the same idea is that in order to have the impact, really to be able to, and to give access to more people, that was always a priority for me, is finding a way to, companies may have a budget, but an individual may not. So how do I provide that, and how do I service them and serve them with the same intention, but in a different delivery, and one that they could access. So I love that, and I love that you've done that, and that's something that I think that has so much impact and allows you to touch so many people. And I know that I've met in your community so many amazing people who are doing exactly that, really finding their voice and finding what impact they want to leave on the world. And my story is probably not very different. I think by the time I came to you, I started to really already figure that out. But working with you has allowed me to articulate that and also really co-create, well, not just you, but other people in the containers that you create, which is so valuable. To be able to be, creative and be in a space where you can flow freely and brainstorm and, get insights from other people as well. So I think that has so much value as well.
Thank you. For those of you watching and listening, I hosted a torchbearers dinner a couple of weeks ago that I invited Maria and several of my community members to. And the reason that I had this dinner was because I truly believe that you are all light workers and you are torchbearers, and you are leading the way and lighting the way for all of us. And that was such a magical evening to watch all of you come together in community and just share ideas and help elevate and amplify one another's voices. I don't do this by myself. This is all about community.
Yes.
And we do it together, and together we are better.
Yeah. And what was so great about that dinner as well is that there were so many different people that came from so many different paths and experiences. And that, I thought, that was another thing that struck me, which again, if you're not picking up on it, it really kind of highlights everything we've talked about already, that everyone was with the same intention, coming into or stepping into that power, but they all came from different places and different experiences, not just physically, but also just life experiences, which I thought was so powerful to see that happening in real time.
Thank you.
Yeah, I love that. So what do you think for us, as your work, my work, people who are in this space doing this work together, are our biggest priorities for the next 5 years?
I think it means showing up as authentically as possible. You've heard me talk about this, Maria. There's a trust recession right now.
Yeah.
And because there's a trust recession, it's important that we start to create trust capital relationship capital, and I also have now been talking about attention capital. Where are you spending your attention? So trust capital means you show up consistently, you show up the same over and over again. I'm not going to all of a sudden say I'm an AI expert. I am not going to all of a sudden create an online course about AI ethics.
Yes.
That's what my speaker, Marisa Zalabak, can talk about that. I will be consistent in how I show up and who I am when I show up in order to continue to build my trust capital. It also means my business is accredited with an A+ from the Better Business Bureau of New York City because there's so much bad work out there that I need to make sure that our work at the Big Talk Academy stands out. So in the next 5 years, it's going to be really important that you continue to build trust capital, build relationship capital with people that you know want you to succeed. It's not about people who have the same opinions as you. It's about people who want you to succeed and will have your back and your front because they understand community is important. And then attention capital is, what are you spending your time doing? Get really dialed in with where you're spending your precious attention. And when you get clear on who you're spending time with, where you're spending time with that person, what your attention is being spent on, then you can create a very streamlined trajectory of success for your business, and you can model what's possible for communities.
I love that. That's amazing. And I totally agree with you. I think also couple of things I wanted to expand on. You know, the trust capital. You are so right that right now, the trust factor, trust recession, that's what you called it. You know, I think for me, just telling my own story, I came from corporate America. You know that a lot of my listeners know that. And then started my own business. And for the first 14 years, maybe 13 years, I did no advertising. I did no marketing. All of my business, I was very fortunate, was referral-based only. And then wanting to move into being able to serve more people, of course, I started to get into this environment of online and people knowing you on social media and all of these things that are necessary and very valuable business tools and paths. But with that being said, there's a lot of fakers out there.
Yeah.
There's a lot of fakers. And it was almost like I was surprised by that. And thinking back now, I don't know why I was surprised by that because it's very much the same as real life. There's a lot of fakers. But I think it's that online social media environments
you can hide.
You can hide,
You don't have to prove anything.
You don't have to prove. And unfortunately, there are a lot of people who get totally sucked in by that. And so there are things that I, too, don't want to be or don't want to do. And some I've been advised to do by people who are, quote unquote, teaching you how to do this online, work. I agree. You cannot violate that trust. You cannot deviate from who you are, what you are good at. None of us are good at everything, right? So anybody who's claiming to be that.
Yeah.
And I think that is something that I hope will start to separate, almost like the cream comes to the top, right?
Yes.
I hope that that's what we will start to see. But I don't know, I think it can get really murky and cloudy. And but at the same time, you have to stay true to who you are. And I think build that trust because otherwise it doesn't hold even, what am I trying to say? Otherwise, it's not sustainable because people will see very quickly, even if you fooled them for a minute, that's the business will fall apart.
It will. You can't sustain it. And people are going to start noticing that those fakers are copying you.
Yeah. Yeah.
And all roads will lead back to the source.
Yeah, 100%. And I've already had that even in my short time where it's like, wait a minute, she's saying a lot of things that I talk about. What the heck,
Yeah.
But it is what it is.
I think consumers are becoming smarter as well.
Yeah.
And going back to AI, I had a call with an amazing thought leader. who got onto my calendar, and I usually people are referred to me who want to work with me one-on-one, or they work with me in a smaller capacity and then move into one-on-one work. And she was essentially cold to me. And I said, I would love to know how you found me. Was it referral? It's not referral. Google? And she said, no, I used AI. And I said, wow. I didn't want to ask her, what questions did you ask? Because we had just met. We were still kind of getting to know each other. And she said, but I want to tell you, you should be very proud. You have a pristine reputation. And that meant everything to me. And that's what we're talking about when it comes to trust capital.
Yeah.
Is that when you're consistently showing up online, even if there's haters, even if there's posers, just stay your path, because all roads will lead to you as the source of the material. Yeah.
That's great advice. So one of the things that I would love to talk a little bit more about is your career has been unbelievable. Talk to me about, if you would, all of your experience, not just being a dancer, but working with unbelievable names in the business, on screen, in film, and as a producer, director, screenwriter, all those things. What are the biggest lessons you've learned, or any stories that really stand out as pivotal that have kind of supported you along the way or brought you to the moment now where you are?
Well, thank you. I'm very grateful that I've had and have the career that I have. I have loved working with everybody, whether it's Kelly Riley from Yellowstone, or you as a rebel leader.
Thank you. That's very kind.
And the through line is truly, how can I help show you, or the actor, what's possible by simply reflecting what I see. And when I was working with, when I was choreographing Romance and Cigarettes, John Turturro's feature film, I was given an opportunity to meet with James Gandolfini. You have to meet with these actors before they can trust you, and there's a whole process.
Right, and build that rapport.
Yeah. And upon our first meeting, it was so comfortable. And trust me, I went in prepared. I didn't just show up and, hey, what's up?
Yeah.
I was prepared. I knew exactly how I was going to communicate what I thought the vision of the movement style was, which was very pedestrian. I wasn't going to come in and make these actors do ballet. I was going to come in and help them communicate who they were as characters through movement. And when I was able to communicate that and share that with Jim, he immediately softened and essentially wanted me by his side the entire time, because I made him feel comfortable. And that was a huge moment for me, because let's be clear, he was a genius actor. He was bigger than life. He was beloved by everyone. And being in his light was really powerful. And I was truly honored to be his choreographer and then move into being his friend. And that was very special. I also absolutely loved working with Catherine Garcia when she ran for mayor against Eric Adams. I was on her debate team. I coached her on how to communicate more effectively on the debate stage, and that was truly a high. Loved being able to be that close to somebody who was so devoted to the policy change of my city. That was really
working for you.
Oh, so fantastic. I loved that completely. I loved working with Dr. Dwayne Jenkins, who is a robotics oncology surgeon.
Wow.
And he works with women who have cancer, and he uses robots to save their lives.
Wow.
I was very proud that I pitched him to the TEDx Deer Park Women. He was the first man to speak at a women's TEDx event, and I was super proud of that.
Wow. That's awesome. Yeah, which, by the way, you're also the ex-director of TEDx Lincoln Square, which talk about that experience. And if that's something that was pivotal in why you do what you do, or was it just part of the journey?
That's a great question. When I worked with my first speaker, I worked with Petra Kolber, just like a one-woman show. She asked me to direct her TED Talk, and I worked with her on script analysis, choreography, and blocking. Same thing we did in the speaker salon. And I didn't think anything of it. And she said, there's speakers who need this kind of support. And I thought, okay, well, that's interesting. And as soon as I opened up to the universe brought me all these speakers. So I had all these speakers who wanted to work with me and who were working with me and no place to put them. As a theater producer, what do? I put on shows. What's the best show for a speaker? At the time, it was TEDx. So I got my TEDx license. TEDx Lincoln Square, produced 2 years of shows here in the city. Absolutely loved it. It was like Broadway meets TEDx. It was what I called theatrical academia. And I have all my Broadway friends sing and dance, and there was an MC, and it was really, really fun. And then I outgrew TED because I wanted more creative control. And started producing my own events and producing the speaker salon. And, 2026, there's going to be a new event that I'm producing live with speakers, which you'll be invited to.
All right. Well, I can't wait. As you were talking about the experience with working with all the incredible names, in particular, Jim Gandolfini, when we talked about building the trust, right? You talked about that, building the trust and the rapport. It's so foundational to every relationship. And of course, relationship, partner, husband, wife, whatever, child, parent, friend. But in business, any kind of industry, anything there is, or any kind of service or anything that you provide, you can't communicate or serve someone unless they trust you. And you build that rapport. So I think about even in my own work, in my when I go into companies and, I'm doing a training, there's always that period where they're kind of feeling you out and getting to know you. And obviously, on purpose, there are things that I do to create that and create that experience for them. It's very experiential training, and have them get to know who I am, what I'm about, and what the day is going to be like, or what that time they're going to spend with me is going to be like. And there's always a acknowledgement of the fact that there are going to be some people who are never going to get on the bus. I know that, right? And that, as a friend said to me, not everybody's going to like the food, and you kind of have to know that. But you still try to serve them all the same. And there's that period of them being able to learn from you that can only happen once you build that rapport. Same is true as a leader and all of my team members. If they don't trust me and I don't spend the time building that rapport and that trust, I cannot, number one, motivate them to do what I would like them to do, or inspire them to do what they're capable of doing. A teacher in a classroom, no one can learn from someone they don't trust. So when I think about that and think about how similar that is, and you're in a creative process like that, even just, years ago, believe it or not, I trained, English as a second language. Even that, you have to build rapport with someone before you can teach them. They trust you. They feel safe. All of those things. So it was striking me as you were explaining that, and I was just thinking about, again, it comes back to the point that we made. It's so foundational to everything we do and every place that we're trying to serve, influence, inspire, motivate, educate, whatever, that if, and many times it's skipped, that if that step is skipped, you wonder why. It's like, why don't you realize that if that's skipped, why it might not be as successful? So I don't know. I think that, these basic foundational things to all human interaction, how do we continue to get more people to see that it's the basis for everyone to be able to thrive, including themselves?
I think it's, in addition to trust, to building trust, it's about trusting yourself. I never try to be anybody I'm not. And if I feel myself slipping into some weird facade because I'm uncomfortable, I will immediately snap out of it. And I think that's part of it as well. Always leading from your truth, because if you're not leading from your truth, people won't trust you and they won't know why. They can't put their finger on it, just like when you're speaking from a stage.
So true.
If you're not being yourself on stage and you're trying to be Tony Robbins, even if what you're saying resonates with the audience, they won't trust you because you're not being yourself.
It's very true. And it's like basic communication, right? One thing in our last few minutes that I'd love to touch on is, because I think it's important. I'm sitting here, knowing your story, reflecting on my own, and then also thinking about what the listeners, what also might be important for them to keep in mind. You talked about your journey, right? You had a BFA in dance. It's funny because I have a BFA in fine art, right? I was an art major. And when I think about like the journey and the path that we took, or where we are compared to where we started, I think it's really important for people to consider that you never know where the road is going to take you, right? And I'd love to share this short story and then get you to kind of comment on this. I don't know if I've ever told you this, but I had a professor in college. I went to college right outside of Manhattan, and so, as I said, I was a fine art major. The beauty of that school was that there were so many working artists that taught, because it was so close. They hopped on the bus or a train, got to the university, and they taught there. And she was the design teacher for me for, I think, three classes I had her for. And she was a performance artist. That's what she did. And of course, she'd give us all of these great shows to go to and galleries to see. And that was part of the experience, which I loved. And we did have to come and see her show. And it was performance arts, which simply meant it was a production, but it was painted bodies.
I'm sure I saw it.
Her name was Gina Wenkos.
Didn't see it.
Okay. So it was very intriguing and amazing. And obviously I went on, graduated, and so on and so forth. And then years and years later, watching Princess Diaries with my niece, who I watched that movie 100 times, as the credits came up on the screen, because back then the credits came up on the screen before, it said screenplay by Gina Wenkos. And I saw it a few times, and I'm like, can't be the same person. And then after maybe the 10th time, I went and looked her up. And sure enough, she not only wrote the screenplay for that, she also wrote the screenplay for Coyote Ugly, for Princess Diaries 2, and a ton of other things. And she started as a performance artist. She went on to be award-winning and all of these things. So that's just coming into my mind, and I wanted to tell that story because I was thinking about that as you were sharing yours. What would you say to people who might say, wow, she started as a dancer, or wow, she was a fine art major? What would you say to people about possibility and how to kind of approach life with that?
Well, that anything is possible, and also understanding what your purpose is. Knowing
you said that.
Knowing that you have a purpose and aligning with that at whatever cost. And it's also about not allowing fear or the how to stop you.
Yeah.
I had no idea how I was going to create a team culture. I made the decision I was going to create one based on my values. And anybody listening, if you have a desire for more, it's available to you because you think of it. If you're thinking of what your more is, then that means it's meant for you. And I never thought I couldn't do something. That was the difference. I never thought I couldn't.
So important. Well, thank you for sharing that. Tricia, I want to give the listeners, anybody who is watching, how could they get in touch with you, and what are the things that you could offer for them?
For sure. Thank you so much for this conversation, Maria.
Of course. I love it.
So wonderful. You can find me at triciabrouk.com. And I would also love to give your listeners a free on-demand masterclass called Command Any Room. If you have any kind of fear around networking or speaking, definitely download this. It's free if you go to triciabrouk.com/command, and you can download that immediately and learn how to command any room. I'm on all the socials, so feel free to follow me there. And I'm speaking at your event. Let's talk about that really quickly.
Yes, so excited. So Revive and Thrive Empowerment Summit, it is on June 6th. Friday, June 6th in Florham Park, New Jersey. It will be in the show notes, as well as all the information about Trisha that she just shared will also be in the show notes. I would love it if all of you would come out and see this event and see Trisha speak. Trisha is the keynote, so I'm really honored and excited to have you there. And thank you so much for this conversation. All of the information on everything that Trisha talked about and offered will be in the show notes, as well as the event. So thank you so much for being here today. Thank you so much for listening and watching. I hope you've enjoyed this conversation as much as we've enjoyed having it. Thank you, everyone. See you next time on the next episode of Finding the Upside.